All right, we are live. It's October the 14th, 2025. And I just watched the Erica Kirk receive the Medal of Freedom on behalf of Charlie Kirk. This time dressed appropriately, dressed in black, no fireworks. Keeping up the act. Again, if your starting premise when it comes to the Charlie Kirk event is that he is dead, I would ask, what is your evidence? I saw it on TV isn't good enough. Especially not in 2025. I mean, auto hoaxers have their work cut out for them. Every point that we have stressed over the last few years is now common sense. Fake until proven real. Oh, you're a crazy conspiracy person. Now, that's a standard approach. I was talking to someone who was describing how their kids in school have these apps. I'm not sure what it's called, I have to look it up. But anyway, tools to help them discern if something is AI or not. I saw this AI clip of somebody using one of those foamy soap dispensers, and a ball of white foam comes out, and it becomes a kitty cat, a little white cat. And the cat raises one of its paws and then gives a peace sign. And it looks real. So if you think the Charlie Kirk thing was real, then why don't you think the foamy soap cat is real? Because they're both compelling. They both look real. Like, if your sole criteria for judging real or fake is it looks real, how do you even live as a sane person in 2025? And this is a point that I think anybody who does media fakery analysis needs to really think about, is that the visual deconstruction will not be your primary mode moving forward, because it's getting better. Like, if all you have is it looks fake, or let's look at these clips a million times, that's not going to be very effective as an approach as we proceed into our metaverse future. Yes, exactly, Kevin Mooring. It looks so fake, it is real. It must be real because it looks so fake. Pope Elon is a construct very much analogous to Charlie Kirk. You know, I'm so happy for this event because it has given us specific examples to draw from to illustrate points that we have made for quite some time. One of them being about timelines. Like, it's easy to call psyops. You know, just because somebody says this is fake, look, it's like, okay, that's not exactly a revelation. Calling things fake is pretty much common sense now. It's not even an expertise that one must have. Well, let's subscribe to this expert because he can break down the video. Like, that's really not a valuable trait moving forward. It's not a special insight. The next level for media deconstruction or analysts who are concerned with media fakery, the next level is going beyond the visuals. We have to become the blindfolded skeptic in terms of we're not overly reliant on the visuals which they create. So I liken it to this. It's a great analogy, the magic show. If you sit in the seat, you're not going to be able to see through the tricks as the magician improves. You know, if it's an amateur, maybe they screw up here and there. But the magicians of the world stage are improving. And so you have to get out of your seat. You can't just rely on what your eyes are telling you. So getting out of the seat would mean peripheral information, backstage, reading the magician's handbooks, reverse engineering tricks, but never mistaking a trick you can't reverse engineer for actual magic. Like, I don't know how they faked this event, therefore it's real. No, that doesn't work. It's I don't have enough information to deconstruct it or debunk it, but nor do I have enough information to believe it's real, because seeing isn't believing. So now it's considered somewhat rational to be a disbeliever, an informed disbeliever, and a skeptic. By the way, they reinstated the $1.4 billion judgment against Alex Jones. It's like free speech is dead. What are you talking about? That's not free speech. That's a civil suit. Free speech specifically and only refers to the government. but it's all performative. What's the point of it? Well, the point of it, and I think they're doing the same thing with Candace Owens, which is an interesting one as well. I think what they're doing is they're trying to make it look like it's dangerous to go into the area of calling things fake. And Jones was, I guess he had to, maybe we twisted his arm. He talked about squibs for like half a second, but they said, I can't talk about that because Sandy Hook. And now we see Candace Owens is being described by many as a high-functioning apopheniac, a schizophrenic, apophenia, pattern recognition run amok. And if you follow her various conspiracy theory threads where she weaves together Bridget Macron to somebody from the Milgram experiment, it's really random connections. And they're probably doing that so they can already set the stage that people noticing long-term connections between entertainment and events are suffering from some kind of a delusion or schizophrenic, high-functioning schizophrenic. So in other words, our pattern recognizing monkey brains have run amok. That's what they want the public to think. So they're setting the stage. And I'm saying this with confidence because Candace Owens is a character, just as much as Charlie Kirk was. You shouldn't mistake them for real people doing real investigations because they're just traveling along well-worn rabbit trails, dropping breadcrumbs, leading people to predetermined conclusions. So they're obviously setting up conspiracy theorists for a fall, I think. And they want to get ahead of this new iteration, which is what we represent. The new iteration is the media breakdown inclusive of fakery and the long-term effects. We have to get into the long-term effects. In other words, every day of fake news is a page in the history book. And cumulatively, over time, this accretion becomes a factor in considering, well, how much of our collectively agreed upon consensus worldview is objective? How much has it diverged from the real thing? And that's really what we're involved in here. And this is something that was brought up in my conversation last night, which we'll get into. We're not here to predict events. We're not like the world's going to end on September 23rd or anything like that, because I don't think it ever ends. This is government that bred in circuses today looks exactly like what we're experiencing. But what we are doing consistently is we're noting that a major hoax indicator, if you want to know if something is real or fake, is if you watched it on Netflix last night and it happens on the news today, it's probably fake. So we got into a nice discussion with John LeBon about this, and he asked a lot of very pertinent questions, very well thought out questions, challenging the premise of Metascript and predictive programming. And what I like about the Charlie Kirk thing is that now nobody can deny that predictive programming exists. So it leaves them with the choice. Either dismiss it as a coincidence or look at it as an extension of government. In other words, propaganda. Man manipulating man with subtle propaganda messaging, reinforcing psyops, or it's just a bunch of coincidences. But the dismissive, it's a bunch of coincidence explanation is not holding up very well. As time shows, we've been recording these things. This is all empirical research. This is a common occurrence. And it's so common that when the Charlie Kirk thing rolled up, I said, I don't know if it's real, but if it's fake, there's going to be relevant contemporaneous releases in mainstream entertainment. And we found plenty of it. So one of the things that JLB had asked was, can you find any non-fake news that have these same elements? And if we do, would it debunk your theory? And yeah, I'm like, please. Let's find some major news stories that are totally real, verifiably reality testing these things, they're real, but that also happen to be mirrored on the TV that day with specificity. Like, yeah, I'd be happy to see it. I don't think you could engineer this. You couldn't fake this. You couldn't cherry pick this. This isn't the result of a fallacy involving a wide array of stuff and your cognitive bias set to work. No, because we're talking about predicting. We have a predictive model. Freddie says, I don't know about anyone else, but I distinctly remember watching Suzanne with Sinbad when I was a kid. No, okay, no, Freddie, I'm not going to say that you're lying. I believe you. I believe you remember it, but I don't believe it happened. It's called the misinformation effect. They screwed with your memories. They scrambled your brain. So you do remember it, but that's not because it happened. It's called faulty eyewitness testimony. And they create it with the misinformation effect, with retroactive interference. Your memories have been toyed with. The universe has not shifted, but your recollections have. And they do this all the time. They do this with every single psyop, with every historic event. This is how they reinforce our worldview in large part. So the Mandela effect, for those who don't know, is the idea that reality has shifted and certain things have changed and people have memories of what happened before the change. But what I'll point out here is that these are false memories that have been deliberately inserted into your head. And then two, these are shallow memories. So you claim you saw Shazam with Sinbad when you were a kid. You claim you saw that. So presumably it's a good movie. Good enough to be on TV, right? And yet, if so many people remember this good movie, how come none of them can produce a script or a semblance of the script? Like, what happened in the story? What did the genie lamp look like? Are there any details you can provide? And I doubt you can provide any details. You know, I was told by one Mendozaler, he said, everybody knows Timmy fell down the well. Everybody knows? I don't know. I didn't get the update. Nobody sent me a memo that Timmy fell down the well. Well, this argument is an appeal to, ad populum, everybody knows. That's not a good argument, but that was one of their major ones because the Mandela effect is based on a consensus. It's actually based on ad populum. Oh, everybody remembers. Well, look, a lot of people misremember song lyrics. A lot of people get things wrong. A lot of people misspell dilemma. Doesn't mean the universe shifted. But I challenge these people because I got them on record saying, I know because I saw Timmy in the well. So I asked him a question, a simple one, and he had no response. I said, how did they get him out? If you claim to know because you remember Timmy in the well, and again, I'm not saying they're lying, I'm saying their memories have been tampered with. The meme, Timmy in the well, was planted in your head. But if you actually go there and try to access that memory, tell me how they got Timmy out of the well, you have no answer. It reminds me of the Sim character in Vanilla Sky. At the end of the movie on the rooftop, he has this psychiatrist, and the guy's like, I'm real. And the tech support's like, really? How many kids do you have? 5? What are their names? And he couldn't remember his kids' names. And he's like, I'm real? Like, as a question. And he realizes that no, he's actually basically a two-dimensional character. And so your memories about watching Sinbad in a genie movie when you were a kid, that's a false memory. Different from a lie. And it's not your fault. But I would recommend that you look into the Innocence Project. Because many, many people have been wrongfully accused and arrested, and many have served time over faulty eyewitness testimony. And when they examine it, they find that it was the result of the interview process itself. Leading questions, retroactive interference, interrogator bias, where not only were people giving erroneous testimony, but their recollections were actually adjusted. And this is a very well-known and understood phenomenon when it comes to how people perceive things based on the words that are used to prompt their response. Like, how fast was that car going when it bumped into the wall? And they watch a video of a car crashing into a wall. How fast was the car going when it collided with the wall? Well, the people who hear the word collided will have a different impression. They'll say it's gone faster than those who saw the statement as it bumped the wall. And that's one of the ways the interrogator bias works. And again, when somebody recalls something and new information is brought up, it interferes with it. So that's what I mean by the interference. So false memory syndrome is a real thing. Andrea says, no one who misremembers song lyrics knows any lyrics of the song except the ones they misremember. Well, I use that as an example of there are a lot of popular misconceptions, and many of the so-called Mandela effects are simply popular misconceptions that have been put into this box. Like, for example, okay, Raymond, I'm glad you brought this up. Jaws' girlfriend in Moonraker had braces. It was a whole joke. I suspected it was edited to corroborate the Mandela effect. Okay, now, a couple of things about this one. How many, okay, do you claim that you remember this? Because it's kind of funny, you got like some like 25-year-old on TikTok, Ed used to pass out big checks, but now they say he didn't. It's like you were -5 years old when he was last alive. You couldn't remember that. So if you claim that you remember the girl Dolly from Moonraker with braces, I would like to know, did you have it on VHS? Or did you see it in the movie theater? And I've explored this one, and here's one thing to point out. You can't consider this one a Mandela effect. You know why? Because the Mandela effect didn't emerge until 2012. It was coinciding with CERN, but the discrepancy about people's ideas about Moonraker and Dolly's braces, that discrepancy was talked about in the late 90s. You can find articles about it. And the discrepancy was largely about how it would have made sense on some level. You know, that this guy with this messed up grill sees a girl with the messed up grill. And there is this theory that she did have braces at first, but that since she was shown with pigtails, the braces made her look very young. And then the giant next to her gave this really kind of the wrong impression. And so it has been suggested that they airbrushed the braces out to make her look more age appropriate. So I could buy that as a possible explanation, but then all those who claim they saw the braces in the VHS would be lying. Oh, Raymond says, I had it on VHS, I can't prove it. I'm not gonna bet the house on it. Yeah, so if she did have braces and they altered it, it wouldn't have been reflected on the VHS. And if you weren't in the theaters in 1978, then you didn't see it. So that might just be completely false. But again, this was talked about long before the Mandela effect. Now, the issue with that theory, that maybe she had braces and they wiped it off, the problem with that is the actress and all the behind the scenes footage and photos would contradict that. In fact, she says that no, she never wore braces. So where do you go with that? Well, you have people making claims based on a VHS that couldn't have had it, unless it was the Mandela effect, but this thing preceded the Mandela effect. Unless you're going to argue there was always the Mandela effect, which is movie. So no, I've already debunked the Dolly had braces thing, and everybody who claims that they remember it should be able to provide you a ticket stub from when they were in the theater in 1978. And most of the people who claim to have seen it in the theater would have been like 3 years old. Nobody has produced the Shazam script. Yeah, Freddie says, Hollywood should make Shazam 2 just to mess with people. Well, he participated in a comedy sketch to mess with people based on the Shazam thing. Now, he was in a movie at the time, I'm talking about Sinbad, where his head was coming out of a mailbox on the movie poster, kind of like a genie. So you can kind of, and then he wore this like genie costume when he was doing his comedy with those big baggy MC Hammer pants. So I can kind of see how people conflated these things. Yeah, well, that's what I'm saying, Raymond. He says, to clarify, the Mandela effect is a psyop. I do think they could mix faulty memories with post hoc editing. Yeah, because I've talked to a lot of these people, and none of them seem like they're lying. They all really believe it, so I'm like, okay, well, I think they do believe it. And the more I looked into the misinformation effect and how it has an obvious utility in the psyops. See, every time they do a made-for-TV version of something, and this also applies to predictive programming, by the way, which is our main topic today. What they're doing with predictive programming is they're planting memories. I mean, you might not think of it as a memory because you're just watching it on TV, right? Or in a movie. But all that content is stored with your memories. And this builds associations. This is a foundation for how you interpret future events. So they've already planted the seeds, and now they run a psyop. And now your perception of the psyop and your recollection of it can be conflated, especially when they do like made-for-TV versions of an event. It's kind of interesting how they've done this. Like, a lot of the footage that people recall from Pearl Harbor was from a documentary that, you know, isn't labeled or isn't explicitly described as a dramatic recreation. But no, the fact is, the misinformation effect is well understood. And there was this clip you can find on YouTube where the psychiatrist is doing a study on this stuff, a psychologist, and she's like talking about how she has a poster from Disneyland behind her, but it was modified, and they threw Warner Brothers characters in it. And she never drew attention to it, but she would ask people who went to Disneyland, oh, you went to Disneyland, and do you remember seeing Bugs Bunny, Elmer Fudd? And people would talk about seeing Bugs Bunny. And she would ask them, you know, what did he do? Oh, he turned around, he had his fluffy tail, and she got them to basically confabulate based on a faulty memory, because Warner Brothers isn't at Disneyland. But she said just having the movie poster from Disneyland with Bugs Bunny in it was enough to screw with somebody's recollection. Andrea says, I argued with the 25-year-old who claimed Billy Joel lyrics from Piano Man 73 were changed, a song I've been playing since 1980. I couldn't convince him otherwise. Right, that's like, okay, you got Joe Osteen. And I don't know if it's Joe Osteen or Joel Osteen. That he has the font, it's ambiguous. Well, a lot of people say that's a Mandela effect. And I'm like, does he know? Does somebody tell him and his family that their last name changed? Andrea says, I was also a DJ in the 80s and I don't misremember any of the songs Mandela people agree were changed. Well, you know, what's funny about this Mandela effect is that they should have called it the Ed McMahon effect, because none of the Mandela people know anything about Nelson Mandela. And the people who know about Nelson Mandela, his supporters, the people who were alive and were actually not given this idea that he died in prison or whatever, did that. But it's a completely incoherent thing, because the Mandela effects are not uniform. Some people misremember some things, some don't. But I've gone through them with a magnifying glass. I mean, I really did go through every one of these. You can name a Mandela effect and I can explain the misconception. Like Fruit Loops. Like, oh, Fruit Loops used to be spelled F-R-U-I-T. And like, when do you remember that from? Like when you were a kid? Like, kids don't misspell words like fruit. Well, the thing is, and I looked into it, Fruit Loops has always been spelled F-R-O-O, because the word fruit would be considered misrepresentation, like as far as marketing goes, because they're not using actual fruit. So they never had that. And then you have the Ford logo. Like, oh, the Ford logo didn't have that little twisty on it before. Like, well, if you look into the past, Henry Ford was besties with Thomas Edison. And he put TE, a very subtle TE, into the Ford logo. Kevin Mooring says Fruit of the Looms had a cornucopia. Yeah, that's another one. A lot of people believe that as well. And, you know, one of the reasons, ironically, one of the reasons a lot of people believe this stuff is they've been given false memories by Mandela-affected people who use Photoshop to create the versions they believe that they used to own. And so people actually are conflating that with the real thing. A lot of these are just, you know, illogical. Like, Jif peanut butter used to be Jiffy. Well, look at the logo, look at the label of Jif, the size of the letters, and how they're organized on the label. There's not enough room to have spelled Jiffy. Of course it was Jif. Okay, so it's Austin. Okay. Okay. Raymond says Looney Tunes was one I thought was weird just because it's cartoons. Right, well, Looney Tunes is because it was about the music, the crazy music in the background, the tunes. And I think there's also something of a fallacy here, just this idea that if you experience one of these glitches, it means that the universe has shifted or changed. It became quite a cult, and a lot of them were claiming that their bodies were changing. They're like, oh, the heart moved. Oh, we have different holes in our skull now. And some of them began to believe, and I'm not naming names, but there were a couple of them who, one of them in particular was saying that the world's terrible and he hates this place. And the Mandela effect gives him hope because he believed that those who are perceiving it are actually going to be moving into a better version of themselves as they progress into this better universe. And that's kind of a cool idea, like if true. Like, wow, you mean if I rack up Mandela effects, I'm going to level up? I'll be taller next week, but I will always have been taller. I'll be smarter, but I was always that smart. You see, it's like this idea that you could literally choose your own reality or something through this system. But as soon as I brought up misinformation effect, retroactive interference, and I started going through these things, debunking them, I was called by these two the God blocker. Like, you stopped us. We were going to meet God or become God, and you blocked us. So yeah, I am the God blocker. And lately, not lately, I actually started this a couple years ago, but I've been ramping it up. I've been recognizing the same type of cultishness in another online community, mostly online, having to do with another, not Mandela effects, but with the idea of media events, like we talk about, being the result of synchronicity. Like Back to the Future, the movie, had all kinds of references to 9/11, and these are somehow, whether simulation or otherwise, some kind of mystical or synchronistic phenomenon. Like, in other words, man didn't do that. The director was somehow inspired to transmit these messages into the future. Like, again, it gets into woo. And that explanation is one of the things that we were dealing with last night with this conversation with JLB. So he was basically asking, why do I think predictive programming is real? And his arguments against it were, the standard ones. Is it Texas sharpshooter fallacy? What would prove you wrong? And I want to say this too. Falsifiability is a huge part of what we do. If you can prove us wrong, please do. If you can explain away the precise timing inherent in the contemporaneous releases that coincide with fake events, if you can explain this as a pattern, how it's been systemic and it goes back many decades, I mean, who knows how far back? Titanic is a good example. Somebody found some Edgar Allan Poe stories coming true, but my point of it is that we've determined that there is a architecture to media that's kind of hidden. That it's not just a bunch of reporters running out there and gathering information for you. That is a huge part of it. That's the cover for its real purpose, because behind it all, there is a constant presence of government propaganda. And that's the easiest way to say it. So Occam's razor, what's more likely? The media manipulation we see is government propaganda or the result of some cosmic force. And the reason why I focused on this is that as long as I've been following this area of research, the go-to response for any weird anomalies, like, for example, East Palestine, Ohio train derailment coinciding with white noise, or Donald Trump kicks off his campaign in Waco and Netflix releases Waco, American Apocalypse the night before. The go-to explanation for these things, these overlaps between entertainment and news, has always been, we live in a simulation. We're in a video game. And if you understand where they're coming from, their point of view, that's the only explanation. Because they know enough to know it can't be mere coincidence, but they don't know enough to recognize it's being done by man. So this leaves them in this area of God of the gaps, the divine fallacy. And I've heard different versions of the divine fallacy being employed here. Some will say it's being done by dark wizards. Others will say it's being done by the simulation. Someone else told me today it's being done by the egregore. And I'm like, egregore is a higher power reference. And he's like, no, it's not. It's a horizontal power. I'm like, what does that even mean? Like, these people will say anything rather than confront the obvious fact that this media manipulation that has been misdescribed as evidence of a simulation has been evidence that the news is simulated on occasion. Again, what's more likely anyway? I mean, Occam's razor, law of parsimony, really does cut to the chase here. And we've had a lot of discussions about this, but last night was very useful because it was on Twitter. And I was able to provide long form answers to the questions. And as far as I'm concerned, it's a point of view thing. It's not even about JLB. So there are two primary points of view, but one of them is bifurcated. You have the world stage point of view, and you have the off-world stage. Trutherville is on the world stage. Alternative media is on the world stage. If you have a world stage perspective, you have certain presuppositions built into your framework for how you interpret media, and it's revealed with your every opinion and reaction to news. So if you think Charlie Kirk's dead, okay, well, you're a world stager. That's your frame of reference. There's no evading that. If you say, I don't know, it looked real, but I don't know because I'm skeptical and I know the media has the potential to fake things, okay, well, that would put you off world stage, because at least you're aware of media manipulation at that scale. And it's a huge scale. It's not like Charlie faked his death. No, the government PSYOP entertainment complex created a historic event performed in front of us to transform society, basically a simulated event, a magic trick. But it's beyond left versus right. It happens at such a high level that this isn't talked about. You realize that, like, Candace Owens and Ian Carroll and all the conspiracy theorists here, as far as they can go is he was killed by somebody other than Tyler. Israel is their basic thing. They can't go past that. And we predicted this would be their talking point. So they're actually stuck on talking points. They're not doing research, even open to it. Because to even entertain the idea that he's not dead, well, that's a problem, because that would immediately implicate the people that moved his body. It would implicate the funeral home. It would implicate Erica Kirk, where you have, look, Erica Kirk was just hanging out with Donald Trump in front of the world, getting the reward for Charlie Kirk. If he's not dead, then she's in on it. She's in on it. If she's in on it, then he's in on it. So the entire structure of the world stage crumbles. Your belief in it would lose its foundation. You need Charlie Kirk to be dead to maintain the integrity of your worldview. You must accept that he died for you. So that's why they can't talk about it. The off-world stage perspective does not have a platform in the world stage. So when I was having this discussion with JLB, my perspective here is that he is as far as his frame of reference, he has the basic world stage perspective. That it's basically real until proven fake. However, he's open-minded. And one thing that I recall about his work is that he's done a lot of work on the, quote, history hoax. And that's what we're really doing here. We're looking at history. If you accept the notion that history is largely a fabrication, well, at what point did it stop being fabricated? At what point did it become real? Is it real right now? Because history is just a compilation of our news as time goes forward. And if we know that news is infused with psyops, if fake events steer the dominant narratives and all of the minds in this closed system bounce off that, then how can you say that our present history, our recent history, isn't also hoaxy, staged, and fake? It never stopped being fake. So all we're doing is we're looking at recent fake history, starting with today's, because every day of news is history. The difference between what we're doing and what the mud flood crowd, Tartarians, are doing is that we're examining evidence, verifiable evidence of media manipulation becoming a warped version of history, or history bending. We're noting the directors involved, the characters involved, the merging of real and fake, what Baudrillard called hyper reality. We're noticing the news simulations and not confusing it with reality. That's what we're doing. And we have discerned that there is a, quote, model that we all live in, the consensus worldview. And I call it the world stage because it's the best way to describe it. It kind of alludes to the Globe Theater, but we're in the theater of Psywar. So the world stage is the version of things we're supposed to accept, but it's inclusive of the conspiracy crowd. They're part of the world stage. It's pro and anti, it's a dialectic. And once you recognize that all of the alternative media and its believers are the controlled opposition to the mainstream that they oppose, you see, it's this, they're facing each other. Each is the other's controlled opposition. But this means that we're not just talking about influencers and big channels. Every single person who goes with the story should be considered controlled op to the truth, controlled op to objective reality. They're part of the Psywar illusions. Think about it. All these big truthers and all their subscribers are part of the propagandizing of the illusion. They defend it. They're completely in the box. Going through your comments. Okay, let's see here. Penguinotti says, the Ford logo TE obviously meant Tartarian Empire. Yes. And by the way, Henry Ford is one of the individuals whose persona was grafted onto Elon Musk. The T model, Ford T, the Tesla, the Dearborn publication where he published the protocols of the elders of Zion. There's actually quite a lot that connects Musk with Henry Ford, as well as Nick Bostrom and Willy Wonka and Von Braun and Iron Man. I mean, these are world stage characters who are infused with other characters meant to essentially create these composites. These are Frankenstein monsters. Freddie says, is JLB a normie now? No, I mean, look, he's a skeptic, but here's what I think. This is my honest opinion. I think he is a skeptic, but I think his point of view is world stage based. So his skepticism, I think, is going to be somewhat limited. Like, everybody who's mainstream is skeptical of the alternative. Everybody alternative is skeptical of the mainstream. But neither of them are skeptical about the world stage itself. And that's where we're at. What this means is recognizing that this world stage model is a closed informational system, and it's not static. It's actually the result of all of the previous events that led up to right now that are part of this consensus, fake or not. So it rests upon an edifice of fakery. And the off-world stage perspective takes the long view. So we look at this Charlie Kirk thing, you look at the predictive content in Snake Eyes, which connects to 2025 heads of state, 2025, the Tempest, the Emerson Drive video. You look at that and you're like, okay, the fact that they had already put content related to it as early as 1998 would indicate that the script for the CK assassination was already written. Newsbenders, the play 1968, posits that they're writing the news 5 years in advance. Not the daily news, not the minutia, but the big stories that lead everything. The things that transform society, like landing on the moon, or the big assassinations, these are all things that you would consider to be like turning points in history. And that's how the Charlie Kirk thing is being framed. This is the turning point where we save Western civilization, said Jack Posobiec. Well, he's in on it. He knows the truth about this. He would have to. You know, Jack Posobiec is on the podcast Thought Crimes. Episode 33, he had Charlie Kirk on. And Charlie Kirk said, I'm in favor of live televised executions. The guy next to him, who happened to be named Tyler, think Tyler Robinson, Tyler said to Charlie Kirk, oh, you know, the last public execution was in France on September 10th, 1977. September 10th, 77, guillotine, blow to the neck. All right, continuing. Going through your comments. Raymond says, saying everything isn't bullshit isn't skepticism. History hoax is compelling. Yeah, well, okay, the history hoax thing is compelling. Because history is something you can easily take for granted, but we have to remember it's not neutral. It's not objective. That's one of the main misconceptions, I think, here, is that the general public, the world stagers, imagine the media to be somewhat objective. At least the cameras are, the mics are. Even if there's a bias involved, that it's essentially reflecting reality. And I'm saying no, because at any given moment, any one of these events could be a simulation. Just depends on agendas. And that's one of the things that you see. These things advance agendas. But whenever they need to, whenever the government needs to, it controls media at that level. But the big reveal that we've really been picking up on here is that these staged events aren't things that that are dreamed up a few days before. Like, oh, let's fake another school shooting. Let's do a Christian school shooter, make it a trans satanic neo-Nazi witch. Okay, well, that Annunciation school shooting had to have been planned at least a few years in advance, given that the movie Weapons is entirely encoded into it. So if you haven't seen Weapons, it's a school shooting allegory, but it contains elements that happen to occur in the Annunciation shooting, and moreover, it carried over to the Charlie Kirk event. Lesko says, you need Charlie Kirk to be dead. Wow, just the sound of it is psychotic, but you're right, that's their point of view. Well, it is, because if they entertain, because it's one of these things where it has tremendous implications. So if he is not dead, then what? And I like to go with these hypotheticals. Let's entertain the hypothetical. If he isn't dead, well, then they use special effects. Then the people around him were involved. And if you go down the line, it unravels the entire thing. You pull the thread, the entire sweater just comes apart. Like that's how fragile this system is. Their world stage could crumble at a single glitch. I mean, honestly, for me, it was Robbie Parker's smile threw me off. I never looked at news closely. I thought it was boring, didn't care. Just figured the human race was screwed and we're destroying the planet. But that was after several years of working in the death care profession, being around the bereaved. One of the reasons I quit working funeral homes, I was tired of being around bereaved parents, bereaved children. I was just tired of all the sad people. And when I saw the Robbie Parker grin after the gravity of what just happened, I thought, that's not physically possible. If that thing happened to you for real, I don't think you could even force a grin for the cameras. So that was a red flag for me. But to me, I saw that grin and my entire concept of media fell apart. And it opened up a lot of these cans of worms that we're continuing to empty out here. Raymond says, if they can fake events in real time, imagine how much BS history is. No one can even misremember it. Right. That's a great point. Because we're reliant on, I guess, the selectivity to include the whole picture of the manufacturers of it, the monopoly. So there's a media monopoly, if you look at it in this way. Like, if you think about how all media, and this is ubiquitous, it all adheres to the world stage model. Well, that's a very selective interpretation. And there's no reason to think that history is any less selective. I mean, who's writing history? Rando poor people putting their 2 cents in? No. It's a reflection of the power elite, those who can afford to produce it. History is a construct. And what's more, so we're talking about the long-term planning of events. This would imply there's a script. So yeah, a lot of stuff is going to happen, and we're going to cover it generally. But we're going to steer it with this event, this event, this event, all down the line. They're planning it 50 years in advance or further. And the further in advance they plan the event, the more time they have to tap directors on the shoulder, to tap musicians on the shoulder. And they don't have to tell them the big plot. They're just like, hey, I'm with the Central World News Services. I'm with the CIA, whatever it is. We need you to help influence people for the government, national security reasons. So we need some movies about terrorism. You see, they can easily feed themes, plot twists, character names, unbeknownst to those artists, directors, musicians who have hoarded themselves out to government propaganda. And this is what started the conversation. JLB had said something to the effect of, well, you don't know who the culprits are, who's behind it. So how can we rule out that this could be unexplainable or something, or it could be just coincidence? And I'm saying, no, we actually have identified the who. We have. And the thing is, it's, again, like these are all top-down operations. Like Butler, Pennsylvania. Did Donald Trump trick the world? No, the media did. He's just a character in it. Freddie says, calcified lies thinks Charlie was actually killed. He says it's too hard to fake the stuff. He's lost in the sauce. Yeah, they were grifters. Look at the movie Grifters from the 90s. It's like, okay, they already had neck squibs back then. Anything they can fake in the movies, they can fake in the news. This is axiomatic. And if you haven't watched any of the horror movies of the day, then maybe you're just not apprised of what they can do. You haven't left your seat in the movie, in the magic show, and you fell for the trick when you could have gone backstage and you could have seen, no, they didn't actually saw the woman in half. But Calcified Lies is a good channel, but what he does is notices connections in movies, but does not detach it from the world stage perspective. Which, again, the off-world stage perspective means you're inclusive of media fakery, and you recognize that people don't die in psyops. People don't die in psyops. There are no false flags. So he hasn't had that paradigm shift. And I don't care, I'm not trying to influence him, but this is kind of a niche thing where the community of people who have noticed predictive programming content have always mystified it. They always thought this is something sublime, borderline supernatural, I'm seeing through the matrix. And it's like, no, you're seeing product placement by your government. Product placement for fake news events that will go down in history as real. What's up, X322? Thanks for joining. Raymond says, do you think Tesla was a real dude? Feels like they just made up the character, gave him a billion patents because they're lazy and didn't want to dream up more characters. Interesting. Well, given the way that he's been painted up by the truthers, I tend to think that, yeah, he almost seems more myth than man. I'd have to look into it. Nicotrama says, I watched one of JLB's presentations. He demanded anyone who thought sports was fake and staged, unsubscribe and leave immediately. I did what I was told. Well, kayfabe. Kayfabe exists. Do you think it's only confined to WWE? Someone asked a pertinent question. They said, how come there haven't been any whistleblowers? How come nobody's telling what's going on here? And my answer is, you have to look at the psychological warfare. That's what psyops are. It's not just PR stunts. I mean, you can describe these as PR stunts, influence operations, but it's psychological warfare. Their war is on your mind. And they've already won. We've been subdued as a species. We've been completely subdued by this warfare. And in military, you have a hierarchical structure with security clearances. things on a need-to-know basis, and secrecy is inherent within it. I was attached to air defense artillery. I couldn't go into certain vehicles. I couldn't interact with certain people during certain exercises. There were a lot of stipulations because they're trying to preserve secrets. The higher up you go, security clearance-wise, you're signing agreements. You have every interest to keep your mouth shut. You're actually rewarded for being a part of it. So why would somebody sabotage their own career, their own job, and, quote, blow the whistle on such a thing? If they even have enough information to do damage to the system, which I contend they don't. You've got two primary groups of people. You have the programmed and the programmers. The masses are misinformed by default. They're programmed by default. The programmers are actually largely programmed. The people who are reinforcing this thing aren't aware of the extent of the program and media fakery and worldview manipulation through history bending. Of course not. It's on a need-to-know basis. So the people who are involved in fake terror attacks probably have no idea that the mass school shootings are largely fabricated, if not entirely. The people who are part of the school shooting psyops probably know nothing about what they're faking over at NASA. Like, these things are super compartmentalized. So the programmers are easily 95% deprogrammed, and the security clearance means that they essentially know where you are as far as the compartment you're in. We are compartmentalized. We are put into these boxes and categories that are invisible, but if you know what you're looking at, you can tell somebody's point of view. You can see, oh, that's the sheep pen that you're in. That's the one you're in. Interestingly, the Trutherville, the red pill truthers, are in a subset of the mainstream paradigm, which means they're deeper into programming. They didn't want to dream with the blue pillar, so they took the red pill, and it became a nightmare. Well, if you're having a nightmare, you're still not awake. That's why I leave people to their dreams. Well, there is a third category, an emergent category called the deprogrammed. The deprogrammed are formally programmed who are not part of the programming apparatus, who don't have security clearances, haven't taken blood oaths or NDAs, but who have found things out through logical deduction, over time, empirical research, and we've branched off. So there is a third category. If you don't want to be one of the programmed, you can deprogram. But if you're on the world stage, you can't claim to be deprogrammed. You can't be, your mind can't be putty in the hands of the media. And then you say, oh, I'm deprogrammed because I don't trust the mainstream or because I notice psyops. That's not enough. Noticing psyops doesn't mean you're deprogrammed. Deprogrammed means you recognize the program, which is the metascript. The program is the long-term agenda itself. Till says, Snake came out the same year as Truman Show and Dead Man on Campus. Yeah, I think it's incredible that Dead Man on Campus was in the trailer for Snake Eyes. Mango says, did you catch Lowdown episode 4, Tim? Another neck shot. Ooh, nice. I'll have to look at that. Lowdown. Dark Ghost Wind says, just as everyone thought, October 14th and nothing happened. Well, no, the No Kings protest is scheduled for the 18th. Today you have people celebrating George Floyd and Charlie Kirk. Erica Kirk got her little award. No fireworks, but at least she was dressed like a mourning widow, dressed in black. She did something with her hair, I think, to hide the widow's peak because it looked a little too much like a Disney villain. But on the 18th, there's going to be, according to MoveOn.org, 2,500 protests across the country. No Kings. I saw some No Kings person driving by. Kevin Mooring says, Candace hasn't went live since last week. Interesting. Well, she got caught promulgating a theory that there was a plane that took the real shooter away at a certain time, and it turns out she got her time zones wrong. Kevin Mooring says, Loomer might be next in the bingo card. Well, I was looking at The Madness from Netflix, and that has a Laura Loomer-esque character who exposes the election fraud by the guy who owns the big social media, which would be Elon Musk. And as a result of her breaking news that she's about to release, she gets killed with some drug that simulates a heart attack. So Laura Loomer has a predictive programming counterpart in The Madness who gets killed. So does Nick Fuentes. And Nick Fuentes did have an assassination attempt. Kind of weak, but as far as is Laura Loomer going to get it? I don't know. I'm kind of wondering, are they going to move that over to Candace Owens? Candace Owens has set herself up to be this pariah, and now she's being used, I think, to take down a large swath of conspiracy theory as far as its credibility. Dark Ghost Wind says, the people who believe in false flags are looking at it from a completely different perspective that you can only get from Trutherville. That's why they don't understand how psyops work. Yes, false flag theory. So if you didn't know, the model they use, the methodology, since probably 9/11, truthers have approached every single event with it's real or it's a false flag. Well, that's kind of a false binary, because false flag still implies it's real. It just means somebody else did it. And they don't include fake. So it's not like it's real or somebody else did it or it's fake. No, it's real or it's real. But the alternative take. So false flag theory has always been a fallacy, and I pointed it out, and I don't hear very many people using that term very much. I've been trying to point out that you shouldn't be using the term false flag. It's a false binary that implies the world stage has some inherent validity as far as this appeal to authority. Yeah, it's the authority over this. Dark Ghost Wind says, many of these people psyop are just distractions from the real issue, but they don't know what they're being distracted from. Okay, now that I think is an agent tactic, where big channels will say, hey, look, folks, it's fake. Don't get distracted. Don't give it your energy. Move on. Touch grass. And to me, that sounds like pay no attention to the man behind the curtains. The people telling you don't be distracted, don't feed it your energy, they're not doing you a service. What is it? Is it a PSA? Hey, these are the things to not look at because they're fake. Don't look over here, it's fake. I saved you the time of thinking for yourself. No. That's not what we need to be doing. If something is fake, it needs to be hyper-analyzed and understood. You don't ignore fraud. You don't ignore systemic fraud. But that's what they would have you do. So the people who are saying don't be distracted are literally trying to distract you. I think it's an op. What's up, GS? I made it to the live. You have no idea how happy I am, from Sweden. Awesome. Thanks for joining. And if you're not subscribed at ips.monster, you can find the link. If you subscribe, you'll get live stream notifications, or you can join Patreon. Raymond says, media is also centralized. It's easy to silence any whistleblowers by not giving them any air. Anything we hear about is curated. In newsbenders, they had implants in the necks or somewhere in the head of the person who was let in on the secret. So if you tell, your head's going to blow up. That's a variant of the blood oath. If you tell our secrets, we're going to rip your guts out, burn them into ash, and scatter it to the four winds. Or rip your heart out, cut your throat. I mean, these are blood oaths. So you're like, okay, you're in the club. You don't want to talk because anybody at any time could enact the penal code. They say they don't do the penal code anymore, by the way. If you don't know what that means, the penal code means somebody tells the secrets, the other Masons kill them. Interestingly enough, there was an individual, was it Willie Morgan? Some guy named Morgan who apparently leaked the secrets, and he was drowned by Masons, and the judge was a Mason, and they got off. That sparked the anti-Masonic Party, which was the first third party in America. So yeah, our first third party was anti-Masonic. So when we we talk about the significance of these different groups. It's not conspiracy theory to point out there is some significance there or relevance. But I don't look at it as Masons run the world or Jesuits run the world. Like, I don't look at this as secret societies. I think it's more sensible to think about it in terms of security clearances. The structure of the secret societies is relevant because you're just talking about a structure based upon the stonemasons guilds. So the Masons are based on the idea of the stonemasons building the cathedrals or the temples or the pyramids, where you had to have a security clearance to learn the secrets, to see the blueprints. And the reason why the main character in Masonic myth is killed is he's killed defending the blueprints. He won't share them with the 3 attackers. And because he's so loyal and he keeps the secret, King Solomon pulls him out of his coffin and brings him back to life. So he's resurrected. He's rewarded for his secrecy. So secrecy and the protection of secrets is part of the culture, which might also do a lot to explain why we don't have, quote, whistleblowers. It may not be penal codes and fear of getting killed, but it might just be in-group loyalty. And media is centralized beyond just here in America. Like, I say, this is a global operation. It's easier to look at it as the new monotheism. Like, it's tantamount to a religion. Media has supplanted religion. We actually have a religious paradigm that is a combination of the old world paradigms and science fiction. It's all a syncretic blend. But to the extent that media has supplanted religion, it is in fact a monopoly, a worldview monopoly. And this worldview monopoly does function like a monotheistic religion. So that's what I mean by it's extremely centralized. Like, there already is a one world religion. We're in it. It is the world stage. It is that model, the version of the reality that we share. And not only that, not only do we have a one world religion, but it is government. The government is the only government. The government is a ubiquitous presence, capital G. All these other governments, lowercase g's, are there for our confinement, to stir the pot and keep us in the perpetual war. But I think it's kind of misguided to think that there's actually any real competition or animosity or anything at the higher levels, because they all cooperate on big fakery. 2020 revealed this. The space program reveals this. The ISS reveals this. There is ubiquitous agreement among the governments and the power elite to adhere to this worldview. I think it's high-tech religion. GS says, Lavenda said JFK was from a book written by a Kabbalistic Nobel Prize winner in the 1920s before JFK was born or was just born. Interesting. There's, in terms of scripting of history, there's some links that you should look at between JFK and Lincoln's assassination and their political careers, and how they seem to have been on the same timeline, just 100 years apart. But that makes perfect sense to me. So if we're talking about the world stage, we're talking about the version of the world as altered by media lies, by simulated events that are considered actual historic events. But in addition to the events, you have the people that act in these events. They have roles. And my suggestion here is that the role of Charlie Kirk was fabricated while he was probably a baby and had nothing to do with the person we saw as Charlie Kirk. But that whoever became Charlie Kirk, whoever took that role, was taking on a role that was preordained to end in a certain way. It's a storybook life, a complete construct. Charlie Kirk is a construct. And you could say as much for his surrounding colleagues, for Candace Owens, construct. Jack Posobiec, construct. Anybody who was part of the J6 event, who are part of that PSYOP, like a crisis actor is a construct. It's a person playing a role for TV, but it's like an amalgamation of reality TV and news. Oh, I see. The JFK assassination, the name, Grassy Knoll and Oswald is mentioned. Okay. Okay, now, I was looking into John Frankenheimer and his relationship with the Kennedys. We need to look closer at that, because that was the guy that drove RFK to his death at the Ambassador Hotel, while John Frankenheimer directed Manchurian Candidate about the mind-controlled assassin. So he drives RFK to a hotel where a mind-controlled assassin kills him. And then on September 22nd, 1963, 2 months before the, quote, assassination, JFK and Jackie filmed a home movie where they simulated his death and covered him in Heinz 57 ketchup. And the Secret Service are part of it. And it's I haven't seen it. Vanity Fair did an article on it. They released some screen caps, but I don't know if we're ever going to see it. But apparently some of the shots do look like they came from Zapruder's film. So what were they doing? Were they rehearsing? What's up, Tunax? Yeah, I saw Erica at the White House. I said she was dressed appropriately and there were no fireworks. GS says, Schism 206, Michael Joseph did a reading over JFK that made it look like a script based on Carl Jung's idea of archetypes and his colors. Highly recommended. Yeah, my start on Metascript, this concept, I think began with King Kill 33, where James Shelby Downard explains the occult significance of the events leading up to and surrounding the death of JFK, and he even talked about Camelot, and he suggested that JFK was a construct, more or less, that they were creating for us, and that it was actually a modern killing of the king ritual, which is derived from Fraser's Golden Bow, which describes this lineage of, I think, French kings who, if their kingdom was ailing, the king wasn't doing their job or something, they would kill them on a hunt. They would sacrifice the king in order to, I guess, I don't know, appease the gods, whatever it is. The idea was you kill this king in a sacrifice and the kingdom then prospers. But this macabre rite and this theme is something that he attached to the JFK thing, among other facets. But he suggested it was what he called, I think, Masonic psychodrama or something that is basically a theater, a theatrical thing. But he thought JFK was really killed, which makes it increasingly ominous. Penguinati Auto Hoaxer says, security clearance beneficiaries prove only the scoundrels who sell out their fellow humans for a Happy Meal rise in society. Good people seem to have a hard time conceptualizing how bad people are or can be. Because if you don't think like a psychopath, if you don't think like a narcissist or a control freak, that might not be built into your assumption about things. So well, there's no way they got all these people to do bad things. Are you sure? Look at the inmate populations and look at the egregious types of crimes and inhumanities many of these incarcerated people have committed. There are a large number of people who will do evil, who will kill you for a Happy Meal. So the idea that you couldn't reward people for taking part in psyops, that it would conflict with their conscience and they're going to blow the whistle, yeah, that's kind of naive. I did a test. I put out some ads a few years ago where I was hiring people who would be willing to fake die and to crisis act for the news. And I had an endless succession of emails of people who were willing to lie on camera for $50. 50. All right, let's continue. Dark Ghost Wind says, Edward Snowden's NSA, I think, is a good example of this. There's a predictive program in regards to it. Informer, which is a song from an artist called Snow, that looks like Snowden. Oh, that's interesting. Sunk Works Extra says, is there any reference for the Sonic in Masonic? Well, it's a reference to stone masonry, but it wouldn't shock me because it's a symbolic system with an exoteric and an esoteric. And from my experience, a lot of the people who are in the basic Blue Lodge are still esoteric. I was actually very disappointed in the lack of curiosity. I spent more time in the Lodge library than interacting with them until I met one individual who was a Rosicrucian, and he gave me a bunch of literature, which I found surprisingly to be the source content for a lot of what Aleister Crowley published in some of his works. Now, he was a plagiarist. Well, I don't know if he's a plagiarist, but he was certainly pirating content from the Masons and repackaging it. Yes, Remrek, in full agreement with the Antarctic Treaty. Yeah, above and below, ISS to the Antarctic Treaty, all the powers of the world, all the big governments agree on these boundaries. And they agree on the consensus version of history. Mudflood says, are you on the side of the road trip? I'm working out of my truck right now. I'm trying to raise money to get into an office space. But I had some obstacles, but I will be in a new office space at the latest end of November, but I think it might be sooner. Depends on book sales. And also other side gigs. I've been doing some other work. But I'm attempting to get into a studio, and my first priority will be to reinstate the 24/7 live stream. Mudflood says, Nick Fuentes is the most obvious construct. Oh yeah, Nick Fuentes is a Poe, a parody of extremism, and he knows it. He is smart, he's funny, but he's also affiliated with Ollie Alexander and dozens of instances of grooming. I mean, there's a lot of stuff there I don't care to get into. But if you've seen Spike Lee's movie Black Klansman, you can see that David Duke, a younger David Duke, is certainly the basis for Nick Fuentes right now. That movie has some connection to him. The mustache, America First, and all that. Like, he's a construct. Gia says, do you think it's a belief that scripts plant ideas in the collective unconscious and then they manifest it like planting a seed, nurture it? That's an interesting way of looking at it. Like propaganda, Edward Bernays, that is the purpose of propaganda, planting seeds to influence. And yeah, it's largely an unconscious process, and they do get us to build what they want us to build. So you're right in that sense, but I think it's multi-faceted. I mean, what they're doing is they're shaping our perceptions, shaping our attitudes and beliefs. I mean, that's what psychological operations are for. But yeah, I think you're right about this, though. It's a good point. Like, the concurrent stuff makes sense. You influence people in the moment. But why would they plant stuff 20 years ago, 30 years ago? Because people remember it. These memories do accumulate, and it does have some influence. I mean, we are influenced. We're hackable animals. Always have been. We're hackable animals. The existence of religion and cults and ideology and cult leaders shows that, yeah, there are well understood formula for turning people into whatever you want them to be. I was in the military, and I remember the basic training process and how they tear down your sense of self and rebuild you. They put you in a uniform. You all look the same, shaved heads, marching in step. The protocol for how you even talk to anyone is just, everything is remade. I mean, that's essentially cult indoctrination. And mass media has that power over the masses. You know, we are influenced as a singular, and like they synchronize our responses with psyops. It's one of their great powers. So I was thinking about September 10th. How many people saw blood squirting out of a neck? Well, the people who saw Charlie Kirk, and the people watching Hulu, and the people watching Heads of State would have seen it as well, and other movies that have come up since. But my point of it is, on that day, at that time, if you were look at the dominant imagery of that day, it was a Christian martyr getting assassinated and bleeding dramatically from the neck. And you would have seen it in fiction or in reality. Penguinotti says, murdered Mason Morgan's wife went on to marry the Mormon religion's founder. Not sus. Oh, that's interesting. Yeah, the Mormon Masonic thing is an interesting connection. Somebody said Tupac was a construct. Wouldn't shock me. Wasn't his mother? His mother was a Black Panther. So there might be something to it. The name Crooks, his real name was Crooks, like Thomas Crooks. But no, I don't think that Tupac was actually killed. So yeah, absolutely a construct. Going through your comments, there's quite a lot here. Leo the Squib says, the modern world seems to be churning out even more of these dark triadians. Yeah, what is the dark triad? Machiavellianism, narcissism, and psychopathy. I think that's what it is. Yeah, I think that's true. I think it's actually part of the design. Like this, the system itself, if you wanted to personify it, you know, like Big Brother, for example, a personification of totalitarian government. What is Big Brother's personality? He's not an empath. He's a narcissistic psychopath, malignant. He divides society into two categories, the favored ones and the scapegoats. The golden child and the scapegoat. It's a common tactic where the narcissist will split the people in their lives or their children into these two categories and play them off each other. And there you have the mainstream and the alternative, the conspiracy theorist. So Big Brother has the conspiracy theorists to always bash on and impugn, and then rewards the other ones for their compliance. And then the compliant ones are given full reign to besmirch and attack the non-compliant. So they serve as Big Brother's proxies, transmitted from parent to child, because the golden child, the one who's rewarded for their compliance and obedience, who becomes a proxy ruler, they grow up like that. And I think the system wants to create that. And it's because it needs control freaks to reinforce itself. Like in 2020, we all saw on full display control freaks. The Karen arose to describe it, masked Karens and otherwise, but we all experienced, hey, look, these people are all control freaks. Snitches. The snitching was off the charts. That kind of behavior, Machiavellianism, manipulating people, psychopathy, yeah, that is largely, I think, being inculcated. Lost Age says, is saying somebody is a construct different from saying they're a character? No, not at all. It's the same thing. We're just making the point, though, that the person exists, but they have other elements infused onto them. Like, for example, if I'm an embedded agent, like a spy, my backstory is fake. My family is fake. My job is a cover. So the person that you experience as me is actually a construct. And I am playing a character, playing a role. Raymond says, why don't you just do a crypto rug pull for money and hoax to the moon? Right now, I've decided I'm going to focus on publishing books and rebuilding my royalty income stream. When I first decided to do YouTube full-time, I had enough of a royalty stream that it basically paid my rent. And I think that with the handful of manuscripts that I have on hand, I can rebuild that in a couple of months. I really think it'd be best if this entire enterprise is funded from without. Because when we were reliant on YouTube funding, it was a disaster. Crowdfunding was good for projects, but it's not a sustainable model. And that's been kind of the conundrum here, because this is a niche, it's a small group, and I'm certainly not pandering to any large demographics like truthers or the Mandela effect, and I'm alienating a lot of the people who I should be recruiting if I was solely in this for money. I'm not willing to compromise the integrity of the think tank so I can have a little more money in my pocket. It's not worth it. We've been at this for a long time. We've been very consistent, and I'm not going to compromise it. And so I'm just doing my best to get a balance as far as the time I spend earning money versus the time invested in this. That's why I'm back in Discord. Discord has been very helpful in maintaining constant 24/7 research. Okay, Tupac Shakur's mother was Afeni Shakur, Black Panther Party. Well, his name wasn't his name though LaShawn Crooks? Like, why did he have a different last name? Leo the Squib says, Erica Kirk is a cutout of Elizabeth Keene from The Blacklist and Elizabeth King from Homeland. Husband killed, follows destiny to inherit her mother's criminal network, becomes president. Okay, let me screen cap that. Elizabeth Keene. So what is interesting about that one is that in 2025 heads of state, you have Vice President Elizabeth Kirk. And Vice President Elizabeth Kirk is played by the same actress who was the blonde woman next to Charlie Kirkland when he shot in the neck in a movie from 27 years prior. Busy said Tupac was a theater kid and an actor. Oh, he wasn't a real gangster that I can emulate? Mudflat says, do a new secret religion of the elite. Yeah, I should, huh? I should totally update that. I mean, full disclosure, in recent weeks, I think I might be kind of a Gnostic. I've been very outspoken against religion, but I'm not outspoken against spirituality or trying to understand the nature of this place. And before I ever looked at news, I was very much concerned with these questions. And that's why I have all this research regarding this, the secret religion of the elite. It's based on my delving into these areas. And I've never stopped looking. And I have some stuff to add on to it, because I do have theory about the real purpose of religion, which I think is to gatekeep what Carl Jung would refer to as integration. Like, I think they're gatekeeping aspects of the self, which is a separate topic. But there's a reason why a lot of phenomenon are just derided as paranormal, or psychic is considered to be superstition or some kind of a ruse. But I think these things are explainable without resorting to religious interpretations. I think there's some down-to-earth explanations for these things, but it's outside the bounds of mainstream psychiatry, which I believe is a system designed to comport us to the world stage. Think about it. They engineer our psychological models to comport us to the brainwashing system. Compartmentalization. All right, so I believe we're about to die. My phone battery's at 4%. Thank you, Thirst for Truth. Appreciate that very much. I could not do this without. In fact, because of the super chat support, I do see myself getting into that office space on Moon Street on my next payday, which will be like the 21st. So I'm trying to get into it so I can reinstate the 24/7 stream and we can build from there. Because now is the time that we need the numbers. Before, I wasn't concerned about numbers and subscribers. I was like, no, we got to focus on the core. We got to purify it. We got to purge. And we have to make like a brand distinction. We have to create this separate entity as a core before we bring in additional numbers, before we aggregate all those who have deprogrammed themselves like 80% or more. And we're at that stage now. And this channel, if you don't know, at one point we had 12,000 subs. There were times we had 1,000 people in the live streams, back-to-back calls. we can get that back. We'll have a larger yet informed audience who are predominantly full-blown off-world stage. A perspective that has never been platformed in large numbers. So that is our next stage, but we've always wanted to enforce here quality over quantity. No, I'm a Scorpio. Lost age. I was born on 11/6. Kind of upside down 9/11. 11/6 is the day in Batman where the Riddler and his online army orchestrated a terror attack and they flooded the polls during the election. Which is interesting because that was the 2022 midterms when the GOP slogan was flood the polls. The Batman movies, the Jokers, these things all overlap real time. There's so much to go into here. I wish we had time. Maddie Ice says, Nipsey Hussle days, you were killing it. Hey, I think Charlie Kirk and Nipsey Hussle are two examples of major psyops that give us opportunities to expand and enlarge what we're doing. Because these are exemplary psyops. They tick all the boxes, they have all the features we would expect, and they contain undeniable elements that a lot of people are noticing. Frank Murr, Raymond, thank you. Appreciate it very much. We're gonna get this back on track, and it will be funner, I guarantee. When we're doing back-to-back calls and we have a larger audience, it will be a lot more fun, entertaining. We've just been through this period of, constraints, but the important thing is we keep on going. Would you be interested in giving a speech or presentation in Sweden like Simon Shack, says GS? Yes. One of the next stages is promoting the book, Handbook for the Recently Deprogrammed, by doing speaking events where I invite people. And I have a plan for that following the establishment of the new headquarters. And yeah, the PSYOP trading card will go back into production in about a week or two. So I put that in the newsletter. Another one of those things that was delayed, but it is happening. So you will be made aware of it. GS, do you want it translated? Yes, we want it translated because we are trying to establish a lexicon to put all media skeptics on the same page with regard to basic concepts. We need people to understand off-world stage versus on stage. Once we emphasize that schism that we've been developing, once we create a self-aware demographic of substantial size, then I think this will be a permanent fixture. Like mainstream and alternative have had a duopoly. It's been a monopoly over the interpretation of things for a long time. We're looking at it now. It's monopolized. It's either Tyler Robinson or Israel. That's who killed Kirk. That's a monopoly. You say there's no big platform for people who know that Kirk's not dead and all the implications? No, there isn't. We're founding it. Yeah, King Ravana, I still have 0 through 12. If you want to email me, timosman007@gmail.com, I can arrange that right now. PSYOP Sidecar says, I have 150 PSYOP cards for you, Tim. I've been focused on historic PSYOPs. Yeah, send me an email. I'd like to see some of your designs. We might as well put it back into production so that when I go back into print, we have those. All right, so phone's going to die. I want to say thanks everyone here for your generous support, your thoughts, your minds, your intellect, your research. It's all built this. And what we're building here is a third branch of media, the parallel media. Kevin says, paint Jason and I'll buy him. Jason Voorhees. Will do. All right, we'll be back. And yeah, check out the new, check out the series that I put on the channel if you haven't. It's read by AI, but take a listen. It breaks down a lot of our basic concepts that went into the latest book. We'll continue this conversation and